Hey everyone, this is Daniel, and in today's video, we'll take a look at Power Platform's service account versus service principal. So we'll first start by understanding what these two really are. Afterwards, I'll do step by step on how to use a service principal with Power Platform, specifically Dataverse connection. And then we'll end with the differences that we have noticed between the two of them. And then finally, I'll end with my opinions. So stick around. This is very important for your company and for future planning. But first, here's my intro video. So first, let's spend a few minutes understanding what a service account is and a service principal is, because let's face it, some of us are brand new into the Power Platform. This is brand new into the technology. So we just need to at least understand the fundamentals of the two. So let's start with the concept of service account. So let's start with the concept of service account. Service account is part of Azure Active Directory. Azure Active Directory is your main source to take care of your authentication. Like, do you have rights to go ahead and access into your company's intranet or your IT department type of services? That is what Azure AD takes care of. So you go ahead and add this into your Azure AD, and therefore you treat this as any user account. A user account will need a username and a password. So even though you see service tied to it, which is a non-user, it is still treated like a user, which means an account is created in Azure AD and a username and password is assigned. Now, a service account can also be assigned different roles and licenses, because let's face it, it is treated as a user's account as well. And a user's account means it has to have a licenses, but you can assign different roles. So by roles, I mean just an overall, give it different permission levels, access to different services like SharePoint, Teams, Outlook. All of these can be assigned, or you can even give it different rights level of, hey, this needs to be a environment member, or this needs to be admin. All of that can be done with a service account. And then it works for any data source, because again, remember, this is tied very similar to a user account, so it can work for different data sources over there. And then finally, you can apply a password reset policy, or just a password policy where a user needs to go ahead and change its password every 30, 60, or 90 days. You can decide that, because again, you do that for users as well to change their passwords. You can do the exact same thing for the service account. So now let's go and take a look at service principal, because service principal is sometimes maybe new to a few of you. So let's spend a little bit of time on that as well. Now, this also requires the Azure Active Directory, but it is not to go ahead and create any username and password. What it does is you have to register it as an application level. So two terms you want to be familiar with: application and registration. Those are the two things that you do, all right? After that, you get something similar to a username and password, but it's not. What you get is a client secret and an ID. So it's kind of almost synonymous, but remember, this is not tied to a user. This is tied to an application that you've registered. And for this, you can also go and apply an expiration date. And right now, as we stand, purely from the Dataverse standpoint, or purely from the Power Platform standpoint, there is some limited number of data source. But remind you, outside this realm, like in Azure or Microsoft 365, there is a bigger scope for the service principal. But when it comes to the Power Platform in general, this is still fairly new. But it requires multiple steps to go ahead and create this whole Azure AD application. So there is a little bit of work involved to it, and I'll talk a little bit more about that in the demo part of it. But just keep that in mind, is that if you want to do a side-by-side comparison, yes, service account, much faster, but service principal needs a little bit of work. So now that you understand briefly the difference between service account and service account is similar to a user account. So I really don't want to spend too much time on that. Service principal, on the other hand, does require some work, and that is what I want you to walk you step by step, creating the service principal, and then therefore going and tying it to the Power Platform to an environment level, and then using it for a Dataverse. So let's go take a look at that. So I'm signed into the portal of Azure, and something like this needs to be done by your Azure Active Directory team, or those who at least have global admin level access. Those are the people who can do all of the steps of creating a Azure app registration that I'm going to do. All right. So here we go. I'm going to go now into the Azure Active Directory, and on the left side, you see something called as app registrations. So I click on this app registrations, and right off the bat, since I have global admin, I can see all the applications that I own versus all the applications that are part of this company's tenant. So you see all of these over here. Now what I'm going to do is click on a plus new registration. And over here, I'm going to go and give it a name. I'm going to call it directly the Power Platform Service Principal Live Demo. In my tenant, I'm not doing any cross-tenant sharing or anything like that. Therefore, I'm going to keep it to the default radio button selection, which is accounts in this organizational directory only, and it's got my domain name, and we're all good over here. Again, for stuff like this, it's just good that you do it by a domain admins because they have a thorough understanding of all this, and therefore it's best that they do that. So right now I can just go and click on register an application. I really don't need to put any more information to it, but at least right off the bat, it goes ahead and now register the application, and it takes me to the overview screen of all the information that I really need to get this done. So right off the bat, what the domain admins or whoever created this will actually send you all of this information. And so you kind of need to filter through and see, okay, what exactly do I need over here? They will go ahead and give you a applications client ID. This application actually means the application that we created, because from here we will actually leverage the service principal information. They will give you object ID. They will give you a tenant ID. This gives you a whole bunch of information over here, right? So start gathering all of this. More than likely, they will send this to you. My tidbit over here is that save all this information in a safe place that you don't lose. Because right now what we're going to do is go ahead and create the secret. Because remember, that's what I said, it needs a secret ID. And that secret ID you don't want to lose. So on the right side over here where it says client credentials, I'm going to go and click on add a certificate or a key. A little tidbit over here. This is what you need to know of, is that when it comes to go ahead and creating that service principal, what we use is a client secret, an actual text type of information, all right? We don't use certificates. Dataverse specifically for its service principal does not use a certificate. What it uses is a client secret. Again, not a client certificate, it uses a client secret. So let's go and build that client secret. All right, so right over here, again, in my client secret section, on the client secrets tab, I'm going to click on this plus new client secret. And on the right side is going to say, give me a description. So I'll just go and put in the exact same thing that I have, all right? And then expires, that is something that you need to understand what your overall company policy is for that. And your Azure AD team or your security team should know all of this, all right? Because you've got multiple options over here. You can go as far out as 24 months by default, or you've got the option of 3 months, 12 months, 18 months, and different companies do these things a little differently. Say on the non-production side, they might give you a full 2 years. But on the production side, they might actually go and say, we're only going to give you 12 months because we just got to make sure that this is still used, all of these other information. So that again is decided by your company. For the sake of this demo, because it is a non-production, I'm going to stick with the 24 months. And basically, these are the two things I have to do over here. So I'll go and click on add. And now it is going and saying updating application credentials. And here it gave me more information. So it actually now gave me the client value and the client secret. Here you go. I'm going to bring my notepad over here. I've already gone and put in some information. So the first thing is for the actual client secret, I'm going to go and grab, first of all, the value of it. So I'll click on that. And over here in my notes, you will see that I actually have the value. So what I should actually do is also type in client secret value. And I'll go and paste it because just to make sure that's actually the one that I got over here. All right. And right now for the secret ID, go ahead and copy it to the clipboard. And then I'll go and paste this over here. So I've got both. I've got the secret ID and I've got the secret value. And it's important that you actually use this clipboard that it does, because take an example over here. The first actual value is a period, a dot. So you could make mistakes if you try to even do manually highlighting it, or, definitely don't want to copy it manually. Just use the copy function. That way you will guarantee get that. But you know what? I need to go back to the overview. So when I go back to the overview, let me go and grab all of this information as well, because there's an application client ID. So I'll go and now copy that to the clipboard. I'll go ahead and paste that over here. So I got an application client ID. Grab that. There is also something called as object ID. We'll go and grab that as well. All right, put that over here, object ID. And then there is the tenant ID. It's called the directory tenant ID. It's good that you have this information. A tip on the tenant ID is that will be a pretty straight, stagnant one for your entire tenant, because you only have one tenant right now, and therefore there's only one tenant ID. So that's just the information that you want to keep. This is the type of information that you should get from your Azure Active Directory or your global admins. They will be the one providing this, and this is something that you want to keep at a very safe place so you don't lose that. Now, once you have all of this, what is it that I'm going to need? There's actually only two things. One is you will need only the client ID, and you will only need the secret value right here. This secret value, those are the only two things that you will need. And I want to mention that to you because when we now go ahead and actually create that service principal connection, it will tell you, hey, it's asking you for an ID. That way you might get confused which one it is. Is it a client ID or is it a secret ID? Because I'm giving it a secret value. Maybe it wants a secret ID. That confusion does come in. Only two things. You want the client, the app client ID, and you want the secret value. Those are the only two things. But we're not done over here, because remember, we went and only created now basically, the lack of a better term, the credentials of it. We also now need to go and do the permissions, because at some point I need to actually say, hey, I'm creating now a app registration. It's going to be used as a service principal, but service principal for what? Because by default, it goes ahead and gives you user read access for Microsoft Graph. You and I just built this together. We didn't do that. This is just something that it does default. Now we need to go and add the permission for Dataverse. So here we go. I'm going to go and do add a permission. Click on the plus, add a permission. This window slides off over there. On the bottom, if you scroll down a little bit, what you will see is this one, Dynamic CRM. Click on that Dynamic CRM. That's the one. Now I know what some of you are confusing. Wait, I'm looking for Dataverse. Why do I have Dynamic CRM? Well, right now that's the only way you can go and get the Dataverse, because remember, Dynamic CRM encompasses the Power Platform as well. It also uses Dataverse. And so for right now, as we stand, this is how you go and do it. So when you do this, basically this is all you have to do. I'm going to basically go and click on this check mark over here. It also goes and says access common data services organization users. You know, common data service eventually flipped over to Dataverse. So in some places, that common data service still remains over there. You and I have been calling it as CDS. It's the same thing. That is how you do it for Dataverse, all right? And then the delegated permission, that's the only option over there. So you don't have to select on it. I just want to point out that that's the only one. But other than that, I'm going to go and click on add a permission. And then next, you will directly see it over here that this is a user impersonation. That's the one that is there. And then the global admins, they have to do something else. They have to go and click on grant admin consent for Christian family. The second pop-up comes up. Yes, you have gone to do that. The grant consent is in progress. Consent was successful. And then in the status, you see these two green check boxes. Green check is good. You are done over here, which means now you've actually got your service principal ready. You've got the client and the secret value provided. You've got the data that you provided, which is for Dataverse. You are done on the Azure AD side. Now let's go over to the Dataverse and start doing the creation over there. So I'm in Power Automate, and I've gone and selected an environment of my choice where I want to actually leverage it. So you just go ahead and switch over to Power Automate as well and just pick the environment of your choice. All right, so once I'm here, I'm going to click on the gear settings on the top right. I'm going to click on Admin Center. And then the Admin Center is going to get me into the Power Platform Admin Center. And then depending on what access level that you have over here, you will be able to see all these things, and you'll only be able to see the environments that you have access to. So I switched over from the home, I went to the environment, and then over here, I want to now go ahead and select the environment that I was referring to, which is model-driven stuff. Go and click on that, and then it will take me into the settings area, and in the settings, there is a specific one that I want. So here you go. I'm going to click on the settings, and in the settings, expand the user plus permissions right there. And then over here, go and click on application users. So when I click on the application users, it'll show me what's already available. But here I need to go and do a click on the plus new app user. And then the moment I do that, on the right side, it'll tell me, hey, whatever is your business unit that you want to select first. I only have one, you may have multiple. Select your business user first. So I'll go and do that. And then after that, you got to go and click on the plus app. What's interesting is though that there is direct integration happening over here directly with Azure AD, all right? Now we call it as Microsoft Entra Identity. You see the names are already changing. This integration is direct. It's not anything that you've got to do to go ahead and make this happen. Only thing you may want to do over here is go and click on the plus new, so all of them show up. But this, what you're seeing over here, directly gets pulled from these applications that we've registered. You see these names over here, this is what comes in directly into the admin center. So you kind of understand how the deep integration happens over there. Good. what we need to do is basically have that name. So if you already know the name, you can either search for it, or I'm just going to go and paste it right there because that's what the name I had. Remember, it was Power Platform Service Principal Live Demo. Just to verify, we come in on this site and we go and do a search for that Power Platform. This is the one that we just created right now, just created. I already selected the business unit, but I need to go and give it the security role. Now, security role is completely up to you. You might have actually created some custom security roles tied to only the Dataverse that you want to connect to. Go ahead and pick whatever is the security role that you want, all right? For the sake of this demo, because this level of security is not what I'm demoing. I'm just demoing how the service principal works. So just to make sure that I've got everything covered, I'm going to go and do a system administrator one. But again, remember, for you pick the security role that works best for your need, all right? I'm going to click on System Administrator, click on Save. So I've gone ahead and selected, given the app, the business unit. I'm good. So I'll go and click on Create. So it'll basically finish up the process doing the deep integration between now app user tied to our Power Platform's specific environment. But now we are using the Azure AD or the Entra's application that we just registered, and it comes up with this hashtag Power Platform Service Principal Live Demo has been successfully added to this environment, which means now the integration between the Entra's app registration is now completed with your Dataverse. So the next thing we do is now go ahead and make sure that we can actually start leveraging it. And for that, because it's Service Principal, we can only do that directly through Power Automate. So let me go show you how to do that. So I'm in my Power Automate same environment where we went to the admin center and did all the configuration of the app registration. This is where the exact same environment. Also over here, just to show you, I actually have a Dataverse table. This Dataverse table is the one that I'm going to use as an example. So I just thought I'll call that out as well. I'm going to just go and say test. And if I do a test, you will see that I've got table to test service accounts and principals. That's the one that I'm going to leverage, right? I already have this Dataverse table. Just thought I'll show that to you because you might have some of your own information. All right, so I'm going to go back here, and now I'm going to go and click on the My Flows. I'll actually go and start creating a new flow. And I'll go and click on Instant Cloud Flow because we'll just do it as a test. Here too, I'll actually go and just give this a same name, right? Keep consistency. That's the same name I gave for when I was creating the connection as well. I was creating the app registration. I'll click on Create. And then over here, we are now going to go ahead and pull the data just to view it directly from Dataverse. So click on the plus new step, do a quick search for data or Dataverse, select the Microsoft Dataverse, and then over here, I can do either one of them. I'll just go and do a list rows, select that, and then this comes up. So obviously I need to go and tell it which table that I want to do. The table that I used, just remember that I put it in as test. This is the one that I showed you. But now when you go and click on this ellipsis on the right, it is connected to my account. This is my personal account. So we need to go and make that switch. And I intentionally did this because this is a real world scenario, right? So I want to show you how you can do this and why it is only tied to Power Automate. So come over here on the plus new connection, click on that, and it gives you the option to go and sign in again. What you want to do is pay attention to this little text on the bottom left. It says connect with Service Principal. So let's go and connect that, all right? And now it comes up with what is the connection name that you want. So again, for this one, I'll go and put in the consistent one, the right demo. And right now you see that it's asking for those three things. So let me go and grab that information right over here, all right? This is the one that we captured it. So remember, when we were in the Azure AD, it had the app client ID. That client ID you see over here, that is what it is asking in the Power Automate. So let me just go and highlight that, do a Control C, I'll come in and I'll paste it. Next, it's asking for that client secret. And this is what may throw some people off, is that which client secret is it asking for? Is it asking this client's secret ID or is it the client secret value? It is the client secret value, all right? It's right over here. This is the one that we want. So I'll go ahead and now put that in directly. And then finally, it's asking for the tenant ID of the Azure Active Directory. So therefore, let's go and grab this one as well. Control C, go ahead and do a Control V right there, paste it. And now it'll go ahead and click on Create. Now, what I've noticed sometimes is that it will submit it, act like it's doing okay, but there could be an error. You could have accidentally put in some different text. So the way to verify it is click on that ellipsis directly and make sure that you've got that check over here tied to the Service Principal connection that you've done. Because it, like I said, it may close it, But if you come over here and you see an error of some kind, that means you've got to go ahead and now rectify that error. Okay, so it's important that you go ahead and do this, right? So after you've done this, now I'll go and click on save, and then we will just go and do a test just to make sure that the data is actually running. So the flow is ready to go. I'll go ahead and do a test. The test is actually going. Clicking on manual, click on test. First time it goes through, give it a run flow. And then after that, depending on if your connection is good, you will go ahead and see this run successfully. Now, I just want to call out that you might actually get an error over here. And the reason I've seen people get the error is they've forgotten to do that one step, is they actually forgot to go into the environment, forgot to go to the application users, and completely forgot to go ahead and now make that synergy between the Microsoft Entra to your Dataverse, connecting that new service principal that we created. This is usually the step that people tend to forget or they missed, and therefore they actually get this error over here because you're almost there and you had all the information that you submitted in creating the connection, but you missed that vital step. So just make sure that you don't miss this step over here. But I just can't stop over here because we've created a connection with the service principal. So I know if your wheels are turning, you are thinking, okay, Daniel, how is that going to affect showing me in the table who actually created or added that row of data? Like, how does that change? Is there any differences to that? So I'm glad you're thinking that way because I want to do a few test scenarios to actually walk you through and really see what happens. So before we do that, let me switch back into this the Power App side. I want to go and actually take a look at that table that we have created, okay? So again, it's the same environment. Nothing's changed over here. What I'm doing is going and taking a look at this table that we are now going to start adding data using these different accounts, starting with the service principal. And then who's using the service principal? Let me not get excited. Let me show you what I mean. I just need to make sure I get the correct table. I think it was something called as test. This is one as table to test. I'll click on it. And then I'll just make sure that we're actually able to see the data. There you go. I've already done some testing. There's the name, the data source, it is active. Like, this is all. The ones that we want to pay attention to is this created by, because remember now that Power Automate's connection is made using a service account. So this is going to be the interesting and exciting ones to decide how this works and how it changes based on who's doing it. All right, so let's test it. I'm going to go back now into this Power Automate and I'm going to make a slight modification to it. What I'll do is I will now go into my actual manual trigger. I'll put in two things. I'll just actually match it to what it is. There's the name and the data source. So I'll come back over here. I'll put that in as the name, first entry, and I'll go and put that in as a data source. And from the data verse, I actually just put that in as two single line of text because, again, that's not the criteria of this testing. The testing is what happens, not how the data saves, okay? So I'll keep these two things over here. This step, I'm going to actually go and delete that. What I'll do is I'll go back and add another data verse step. So I'm definitely not skipping that part. I'm going to stick to data verse. But in the data verse, we are now going to go ahead and add an item. All right, so you're saying add a new row. That's the one that I'm selecting. We'll always just make sure that our connection is still tied. See, it got changed because I went and added a new step. Good thing is it has our service principal connection still there. So all I have to do is just change it. Perfect. On this side, I'll just do a search for test so we can pick that up. And now since we are adding it, it is making sure that at least populates some of this data. So I actually have two things. One is the name. So this name is going to come from the entry that we put in, this name over here. So I'll go ahead and put that in. I'll actually just do a search for name and I should see that. Perfect. Data source, again, I should be able to directly see that. Data source. Perfect. So this is basically the two things that I want to do. All right, it'll go ahead and now take the data from whatever we enter and save it directly inside our Dataverse table. Who does it? What is stored in the created by? That's what we want to pay focus to. All right. So I'm going to just go and start doing some tests first. Let's do a simple test. All right. I'm going to just trigger that off manually. I built it. I did all of this. All right. So for right now, keeping that in mind, I'm going to go and now put something in. I'm going to say this is which test do I already have? I have got two tests over here. So I'm going to continue with test number 3. And for this data source, I'll just go and randomly say Dataverse, right? I'm just going to say whatever I can think of right now. I'll go and click on that run flow, and then I'll go and do a done. Now in the done, the flow has successfully ran. All the steps were completed. Now let me go directly over here. I'll just go ahead and do a quick refresh. And in the refresh, we are back over here directly in the table. And in this section now, it has gone and added a new line. And let's see what happened. So I went ahead and triggered the flow. I did that, the maker of the flow, all right? But when the data was stored, it took all the text which I added, but the created one came by the actual service principal. Because remember why that happened, right? We went into the Power Automate flow. If I go ahead and click on edit and click on the ellipsis, see the connection is done by a service principal. So this is a very important step for you to understand, is now the created by is going to reference that service principal. So keep that in mind, that in the future when you are building such type of flows or such type of keep that in mind, that in the future when you're building such type of flows, have some process built in to grab that user's name or that user's created by or something. Just keep that in mind. And if you really don't care about that, because you could have scenarios where I just want the data, I really don't care about the user, then you're fine. This works just fine. But I want to take it to the next level. All right, what I want to do is come by directly over here. I want to go outside one step, and now the run only users, I want to go ahead and now put in another user to run. So I'm going to click over there and I'm going to search for Finn. All right, Finn is the user. Selected that. Now Finn, I'm going to go ahead and add it over here. First criteria, I'm going to leave this as is. The Microsoft Dataverse, its connections is going to use the connection, and that's what it is. The connection that we have created is the one with the service principal. So I'll go and click on save right now. All right, so I've actually now shared this flow, which means now Finn can also go ahead and run this. Just to be on the safe side, I'll go and just grab this URL. Then I'll come directly into signing in as Finn. On the top right side, you can see that this is me signing in as Finn. But if I just open up another tab, paste that URL that I just copied, it should at least take me to the flow level. I will really not have any access to do anything in the flow, just to go and trigger it. Because you see, it's already giving me this message that you have limited permissions to this flow. Basically, it's saying, hey, you can just run this flow, you can't do anything else. And that's what I love about the granular permission level Power Automate has. But let's go and click on run. Right, we know this thing over here, right? So this is now what, test number 5 or 6. I'm just going to test number 5. This data source, let's go and say SharePoint. All right, just randomly picking something else. I'm going to click on run. So I go and click on the run. It says the flow ran successfully, and after I click on done, there's nothing else that the Finn over here, because Finn can only run it. We got to switch back and now directly go back into our actual maker level access, so which is right over here. Go and switch tabs. I'll just go and do a refresh. I should see now a 4th row, and in the 4th row, which will probably be 007 or 008, and over here to Finn, when he made the entry in, it also went and did a created by, and the created by again was using the service principal. All right, so you see how this is working. It's really starting to make sense now. Good. One last test. Let's go back into that Power Automate. The run only users, let me go and click on edit, and in the edit, for the connections used, click on the drop down, and over here it is saying, giving you other options. Because remember, when I first created the flow, do you remember it actually had my connection and we switched it over to data, the service principal. So it's showing my connection too, but right over here it is going to be provided by run only user. Click on that and it's going to say, hey, connections used, users with only access will not control have access to these connections outside this flow. This is just giving you some kind of reassurance that, hey, even though you're sharing it with Finn now, Finn can't go ahead and use this connection to build it any other flaps or flows. No, it doesn't have a data source connector level access. It only has access to this connection inside this flow. That's all it's saying. It's just giving you that peace of mind. So I'm going to click on save right now. We'll go back in and let Finn go ahead and trigger that flow once again. All right, so we're good over here. So I'm going to switch now screens, go back in as Finn over there right on the top. We'll go and run this flow again. And now this time, we'll again go in and do another, I think it was test number 9 or something. I'll just randomly put something in. This time is Dataverse. I'll just go ahead and put it in as Excel. And then I'll go and click in as run flow. Basically, that's all Finn can do over here because Finn doesn't see any data. We got to go back and switch again directly into our Dataverse, into my account, go to the tables, refresh it. And now over here, I want to see what does the actual name show up. Well, it showed up as his name, directly him. So do you understand the beauty of all of this? We are able to go ahead and make sure either we get the user's name, which was actually the person who triggered the flow. We're able to do that, or we can make sure that it sticks to the service principal. Either way, some configuration is needed on the back end to make all this magic happen. But I want to present all the options to you so that you can actually see how we can truly leverage the service principal. So now that we've seen the demo, I want to go ahead and make sure we take away some of the differences that we've seen specifically on the service account and service principal. So the first thing is that the service principal requires an additional license. Because remember what I said, it is treated as a user, but service principal does not. Granted, it requires some configuration, but it does not. Key point. Next, it is hard to identify the makers. Why? Because when you have a service account, somebody will be signing in. They actually have to sign in through the browser, put in the service account's username and password, and actually do it as that service account. Now, granted, using Purview, you can go ahead and get all the login information of what the machine was, operating system. You have the ways to do that, but it does get a little hard. From the service principal standpoint, it is easier to identify the makers, because if a maker is not registered to be able to do it as a user of that service principal, they really can't do anything with it. So you've already gone ahead and put in right a block at the service principal level. Next is that for the service account, it works for any data source, because let's face it, you are still using it as a user. For the service principal inside the Power Platform realm, there is a limited data sources available. For the service account, it works both for apps and flows. For the service principal, it only works for Power Automate or the flows. And then finally, for the service account, you need the username and password, and that username and password will have to be shared. Well, for the service principal, you can go ahead and secure an ownership process, because right at the Azure application, you can tell who the users are, so you can make it more secure. So these are the differences. So now, based on all of this information, I want to share some of my thoughts and ideas on what you need to keep mind of when you consider using either one of them. First of all, users can come and go, but service accounts and service principals will stay. So lean towards using at least one of those two options. And when it comes to those two options, go with service principal. That should be your first pick. And if service principal cannot be done, either for some reason you don't have the access to do it, or the data source that you're using it doesn't allow it, then go for the service account, but kind of stay away from at least doing the users, especially for those high-end apps and flows. We call them the high touch, high volume, high impact. Those are the type of ones that you want to stick with, these service account ones. All right, service principal can save the license consumption, because again, remember, it is not treated as a user. You go ahead and do an Azure app registration, go ahead and give the users, you're not assigning an additional license. Important thing to consider over there. And also, let's think about what happened. Microsoft has already applied this to Dataverse, and specifically the Power Platform team of Microsoft. Dataverse is their #1 data source. So you can see that they're actually paying some attention to this overall concept of service principal and service accounts. And then finally, there are some third-party apps which will only allow you to use service principals. They don't even allow you to use service accounts over there, only service principals, which means you need to go and get that client ID, you need to go get that value, and only then you can connect to it. So in conclusion, I just want to share that the use of service account and service principal is not an absolute must for every scenario, because you could have built one, say, just for yourself, or just for a small group of people, or for your citizen development type of work. Over there, completely fine using your account. But moment you build these high touch, high volume type of applications for the entire company or a big department or things like that, then you want to start considering over a first service principal and then service account if principal option is not available. So I just wanted to clear that doubt over there. All right. Hopefully this video was useful to you. Hopefully you start getting some ideas over here. And as always, keep using Power Platform. Hello. So if you like this video, go ahead and click on that subscribe button and smash that like button. Also, if you have a few extra seconds, can you go ahead and put in a comment? Either say something nice or give me ideas for my next video. And until then, see ya.